This 3-part series is all about mini-nucs. In the first part, we spent time in the bee yard learning how to work with these tiny hives. In the second part, we returned to the workshop to build the mini-nucs 4-chambered hive body and the mini frames. In this, the third part, we are back in this beekeeper's workshop to complete the mini-nuc by building the screen bottom board and the inner cover. There are good reasons to use a screened bottom board in all your beehives, and a mini-nuc is no exception. But for the mini-nuc, we need to make a few changes to the standard plan. First, the mini-nuc bottom board is a bit shorter than the standard. That's because we don't need the landing platform afforded by the standard bottom board. Second, the front rail needs to be full height and flush with the top of the 2 side rails. This is because we don't need an opening on the front like we have on the standard bottom board. And all 4 sides need to be the same height in order to be bee tight. Third, we need to add partitions to divide the top of the bottom board into 4 sections that match the 4 chambers of the hive body above. And fourth, we will add gated entrances on the top of the bottom board's rim. Here are the main parts for the mini-nuc's bottom board. All of these parts were made following the plans for the standard bottom board with the following differences. First, the length of the 2 side rails was shortened from 22 inches to 19 7/8 inches. Second, the bottom board's frame was shortened from 22 inches to 19.5 inches, and all of the frame's boards are 1 5/8 inches wide. Third, instead of using a filler to close up the front, we are using a full height rail, very similar to the side rails, but without the sampling board dado. We can now go ahead and assemble the mini-nuc's bottom board. After test fitting all of the parts, we glue and staple the lap joints of the frame, and then glue and nail the front rail, the 2 side rails, and the back filler. These plans provide for gated entrances, 1 or 2 per chamber on top of all 4 sides of the bottom board. These entrances are optional since we have already drilled an entrance hole into the side of each chamber. But we find that having the entrances on the bottom board to be handy, and we suggest you consider making them on your mini-nuc. We have used these gated entrances before on other projects, specifically the double screen board, and you can check out that video for the details. We are going to use 1 gated entrance per chamber as shown in this drawing, 4 in total. A gated entrance consists of a notch 3 inches long and 3/8 of an inch deep cut on top of the side rails. An entrance block, slightly shorter and slightly thinner than the notch, pivots on a small wood screw. The angle end of the notch and entrance block allow you to open the entrance and then close it tight. Notice that the entrance block is both smaller in length and thickness than the entrance notch. You don't want the block to be tight and difficult to turn in the bee yard, particularly after you get everything painted. So be sure to follow the dimensions we provide and give yourself plenty of room. I start first with making the entrance blocks. The entrance block is 5/16 of an inch thick and 2 7/8 inches long from tip to tip. The end of the blocks are cut parallel at a 30-degree angle. Using a scrap piece of 1x4, rip several strips from the edge 5/16 of an inch thick. As usual when cutting thin strips, I use the combo square and drill bit technique to get an accurate and repeatable cut without any kickback. This tip was explained in our video on making hive bodies. Now it is a matter of cutting the strips to length. You can do this job on the table saw, but today I am using the bandsaw. The miter gauge is set at 30 degrees. Simply cut the blocks so that they are 2 7/8 inch from end to end. To complete the entrance, we need to cut the notches on the top of the bottom board sides. The notch is 3/8 of an inch deep and 3 inches long from tip to tip. You might find this job easier to do before you assemble the bottom board, but it can also be done after assembly, as I am doing. Mark out the location of each notch. The exact location is not important. I am making the center line 3 3/4 inches from each corner. You can cut the notches on the table saw, though I like to use the radial arm saw because I can more easily see what I am doing. Raise the arm of the saw so that the bottom of the cut is 3/8 of an inch below the top of the side rail and rotate the arm 30 degrees. You can now make repeated cuts, nibbling out the notch as you go. Check each notch to make sure it is wide enough so that there is a small gap at the ends of the entrance block. The entrance block pivots on a small wood screw countersunk in the middle. I use a number 8 wood screw that is a 1/2 inch long. On the entrance block, pre-drill the screw hole using a 9/64 inch drill bit, and then make the countersink using a 3/8 inch drill bit. A drill press helps you to control the depth of the countersink, though you can certainly do this job using a handheld drill. There is a right side and a wrong side for drilling the countersink. Be sure to check to make sure you got it right. The final job to complete the bottom board is to install the partitions that divide the bottom board into 4 sections. These dividers are located directly under the partitions of the hive body and are flush with the top of the side rails, so that when the hive body is in place, the dividers rise up to meet the partitions of the mini-nuc. This creates a B-type space at the bottom of the chambers. Before making the dividers, I have gone ahead and assembled the bottom board and painted it using a primer and 2 top coats. I put a lot of time and money into this equipment, and a good paint job will greatly extend the life of the woodenware in the bee yard. I have also installed the screen. Simply follow the standard bottom board plans for all of these steps. Now we can make and install the dividers. We make the dividers from 1x4 pine. The crosswise divider is 14 3/4 inch long and 1 inch wide. The lengthwise divider is 18 3/8 inches long and also 1 inch wide. In the center of each divider, we cut a notch that is half the thickness of the board, or 3/8 inch deep in our case, and 1 inch wide. This notch allows us to assemble the dividers crosswise with the top and bottom flush with each other. Though the height of the dividers is nominally 3/4 of an inch, the thickness of the screen has to be taken into account. You should check your bottom board and may have to go with something a bit different than 3/4 of an inch. Again, you want the top of the dividers flush with the top of the side rails. The dividers can now be installed in the bottom board. Notice that I have painted them. A little glue in the notches and a few nails on the ends will do the job. And be sure to flip the bottom board over and staple the screen tight up against the dividers. You don't want any gaps that the bees can crawl through to get to the neighboring chambers. And with that, the bottom board is done. The mini-nuc's inner cover is very similar to the standard inner cover. There are only a few differences. First, we have ventilation notches on all 4 sides. Second, the bottom of the inner cover is divided into 4 sections. And third, there is a large round hole in each of the 4 sections that is sized to fit a quart feeding jar with a perforated lid, the kind of jar used in a Boardman entrance feeder. I have here the parts for the inner cover. These were made following steps 1 through 5 of the plans for a standard inner cover. At this point, you have a choice. You can either go ahead and assemble the inner cover and then cut the ventilation notches, make the dividers, and cut the feeding jar holes in the assembled cover, or you can make these 3 features before assembly. I recommend a ventilation notch for each chamber cut on the inner cover's rim. The ventilation notch is simply a dado 1 inch wide and 3/8 inch deep. Here I am using the radial arm saw to make this dado. The location of these notches is not particularly important, but we like to cut the dado above the entrance holes of each chamber. This keeps the coming and going of the bees for each chamber all on the same side. There will be occasions when you need to close up the ventilation notches you just made. You can make some simple clips out of scrap aluminum. Here are two styles that work for me. The one on the left is a simple U-shaped clip that slides on from the side. The one on the right is a bit more elaborate and snaps on from the top. I kinda like the style shown on the right. I am using scrap aluminum to make the clips, the same material that I used when making the telescoping top cover. You can cut the aluminum by scoring with a utility knife and bending the material back and forth until it snaps free. Then bend the clips into shape using a set of pliers or a hand seamer. When you need these clips in the bee yard, you will need them now. So make several extra clips so that they are always ready to go when you are. Just as we installed fillers on the bottom board to prevent the bees from moving to adjacent chambers, we need to do the same thing for the mini-nuc inner cover. The inner cover fillers are made in the same way as those in the bottom board, though the dimensions are a bit different. The fillers are made from stock that is 1 inch wide and a 1/2 inch thick, though this thickness depends on the material you use for the inner cover. You should measure your assembled inner cover to get the exact measurement. The crosswise filler is 13 1/4 inches long, and the lengthwise filler is 16 7/8 inches long. A dado cut exactly in the middle of each piece that is 1 inch wide and 1/4 inch deep allows us to assemble the dividers so that the top and bottom are flush to each other. On the table saw, I am making the dividers out of a short piece of 1x4. Rip 2 pieces that are 1 inch wide, and then measure the height that you need. In my case, that is 5/8 of an inch. Set the fence, and finish cutting the boards to the required height. It is always a good idea to check your work. I use the ready alarm saw to make the dados. The dados are half the thickness of the board, or 5/16 of an inch in my case, and 1 inch wide, and centered exactly in the middle of each divider. When put together, the dividers should be flush to each other on both sides and even with the rim of the inner cover. The mini-nuc's inner cover features a round hole centered above each chamber. This hole is sized to accept a quart feeding jar with a perforated lid, the kind of feeding jar used in a Boardman feeder. Like Goldilocks and the 3 Bs, this hole has to be just the right size. It can't be too large, it can't be too small. The magic number is a hole with a diameter of 2 13/16 of an inch. To make things easier, I have included in the downloadable plans for this project a template with 4 circles of the right size. I have cut the template into 4 pieces and glued each template to the inner cover using a spray adhesive. Center the template over each chamber. Then drill a pilot hole near the edge of the template and use a jigsaw to cut out the hole. Be sure to stay inside of the template's outer line. At this point, it is better to have the hole too small than too large. Now at the drill press with a sanding drum installed, I can gradually enlarge the hole until the cover of the feeding jar just fits. If the hole is too tight, then use the sander to sneak up on it. Remember that you will be painting the cover, so yes, you have to allow for the thickness of the paint when sanding out the hole. There, just right. We can now assemble the mini-nuc's inner cover. Glue and nail the frame, making sure everything is square. Then slide in the plywood and glue and staple that. Finally, install the divider. Of course, that is also glued. And I staple from the back side into the dividers. The inner cover is done and ready to be painted. Well, this project has turned out a lot longer than I had initially planned, but we have covered a lot of ground. Remember, a free, downloadable set of plans for this project is available from the link shown at the end of this video. You will want to have your mini-nuc ready to go first thing in the spring, so this is a great winter project. I hope you have as much success and just plain fun working with a mini-nuc in your bee yard as I have had in mine. Thanks for stopping by, and please join me and the Beagles for our next project in the Beekeeper's Workshop.